generically defined at this point. And then the 6 primary bubbles stemming off from that ideal solution are the 6 main hierarchy features that allow for the additional evaluation subcomponents to exist. And those 6 bubbles are where the weighting scenarios are currently developed and defined. And we'll get into those in a second. The steering committee had the opportunity to weigh in on that, as well as some of you were a part of that process earlier this year in January. And I will walk us through that in a second. As a part of as we did the evaluation process, we actually, I'm sorry, not the list development process, there was originally well over 200 strategy solutions, and we worked with the team to help consolidate and boil some of those down. But the list still currently stands at 177 individual strategies and solutions. Now, some of them rely on others in sequential order based on how they're defined, but there was a need to organize them into several categories within those 4 key areas. And I'm not going to read through all those here at this point in time, but we do have those 30 categories defined, and I'll show you how we're going to be able to access that and showcase them to you at a later point. If you remember back, so those scenarios I was talking to you about where the weights are applied, several of us talked one-on-one or as a part of the group here. The evaluation process followed 4 scenarios initially, and now we're focusing on the 2 within the box that you see on the screen. The first scenario, scenario 1, is basically demonstrating an alignment through the evaluation and scoring application to showcase preferences to solutions that align closer with safety implications or improvements and travel performance. Scenario 2 is more so demonstrating alignment with multimodal land use coordination. And that's not to say that we're ignoring safety, but it is implying that safety is truly the foundation, that it is everything that we do. It is a part of what we do, and we have to take that into consideration with every single factor we do for planning and project implementation. The third and fourth scenarios were created as kind of test case scenarios to make sure that we pass the smell test. The third one was to showcase some alignment with the MTP for the 2050 process that's underway. And then the fourth scenario were actually looking at a collective process of all the feedback points from the data from the public over the past year and boiling it into those 6 categories. And so the scenario 4 was pretty close to aligning with scenario 2, actually. So that's why we're focusing on the first 1 and 2. And when we're looking at the rubric scale, several of you in the steering committee had the opportunity to review the rubric scale back in January. It is a values-based or valuation rubric, which uses a consistent high, medium, and low rating system where the project team planners use their best practice experiences and planning knowledge to apply appropriate ratings across all evaluation criteria for each individual line item. Just from the big picture perspective, what you see on the screen is kind of the output from our decision criteria structure. It is a lot to look at, and I'm going to help us boil it down a little bit more as we move forward. And just as a subset, you can kind of see the breakdown. The 6 colors show the pieces of those 6 buckets or those 6 evaluation criteria overarching factors. And then of course the list, you're going to have top ranking ones, you're going to have bottom ranking ones. As a part of today's discussion, we're going to talk about those that are scoring really well in regards to scenarios 1 and 2, those that are not scoring very well in terms of scenarios, and then ones that are varied. And I'll show you how we determined that. We performed a sensitivity analysis for all 177 of those line items. And like I said, the ones that are on the left side of your screen are those items that were performing well. The fact that they are showing very low variability and very low deviation from the scoring metrics is showing that we want to focus on those and confirm that they should move forward. The ones on the right side are the ones that are poor performers, or what we identified earlier today as single dimensional items. They're not necessarily poor performers, but they focus on one aspect of the greater multimodal approach that we're looking for to be the ideal solution. And the bigger picture here that I have blown up for us is to showcase the variability between the 2 scenarios. These large lines show the gap of how one scenario, this one for example, programming item number 50, is scoring really low for one scenario, but then a completely different outcome for a different one. And so we're going to talk about how we weigh those against each other and have a conversation and dialogue about some of those critical ones that we felt were important, which were sent to you in a PDF file by Augustine earlier this week. So with that being said, the way that we're going to structure this, and I've worked with Augustine to make this effective for all of us today, is that we're going to look at, like I said, those top performing strategies first. And we're going to use the Mentimeter tool to demonstrate your confirmation and support of those. And if you want to have a little bit of dialogue about those, then we're open to that feedback. But we have several others after these top 5 that are a little bit more critical to kind of get that dialogue and open feedback to roll forward on. I am going to read some of these to you, and then we're going to shift to that Mentimeter aspect. Let me open that really quick before we roll forward. The first one that you see on the screen here is PM7, and the team defined this to be the policy. There's a recommendation for a policy to define equitable mobility. And through conversations with many stakeholders throughout all of last year, and with all that happened in 2020, we recognized that there was a gap and an opportunity to look at how we should do this. So building on outcomes of Beyond77, we recommend at least draft form that leadership from local and regional planning organizations should work with their boards and other elected officials and the general public to determine effective policy or policies that incorporate factors of equity in any and all planning practices, whether it is transportation or land planning or both. This would help to ensure that all planned infrastructure and service programs help to offer the same opportunity and outcome to all users. This policy should also be dynamic, updating to reflect the evolution of culture and community needs to help ensure planning for the future remains current. So let me pull up and activate, I apologize, the Mentimeter site.
Adam, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
This policy uses the word equity, and I've become very sensitive to that word lately versus equality. Was that purposeful, and why?
That is, oh man, that's a great question, and I appreciate that. I forget if you were involved in those conversations. We did a practice exercise between equity versus equality. And we looked at a graphic that was very telling. It was kind of a bunch of people at a baseball stadium at a fence.
Yes,
I think you may have seen that.
Looking over the fence.
Yes.
I'm very well aware of that.
Yeah, I feel it's pretty well known.
But I'm just trying to figure out how equity, which implies equal outcome, regardless of effort, in all planning practices. I'm trying to figure out how that works.
Yeah, so we didn't actually get specific with certain definitions. There's a lot of these recommendations that are left more open-ended to allow for this conversation to happen as a part of implementation planning efforts that move forward after this plan is completed. But if it's their desire,
I can understand that answer.
Yeah. Okay. So I've activated the slide, and I know that there's only a few of you on, but if CardPost staff wants to participate too, we'd love to get that feedback collected at the same time. We'll give it just a few more seconds since it's a small group. Okay. All right, moving forward, thank you for the feedback. Is another policy discussing equity factors in planning specifically. And so I'm going to go back to the text from PM7 to showcase the differences and why we're talking about this. One is it's underneath the concept of regional partnerships, and the way that my team developed this, and I'm making some assumptions as well. This is talking about partnering with local jurisdictions to create a regional vision. The other one that we're about to talk about is doing coordination to define what equity means. So kind of getting to what your question is, Dr. Mike, and work on codifying it. Now, there might be the opportunity to actually consolidate these into one, but the team did choose to separate that for the purpose of what I just described. And so I don't know if you have open comments on that or desires to change it or consolidate right here on this point, but that is the initial thought process from my team.
And that's exactly my question.
You know, Adam, I think there's been a lot of talk about equity recently, and rightly so. I think, our eyes have been opened quite a bit.
Sure.
But equity includes, not that I have any interest in this, but maybe folks approaching a certain stage in life, a later stage in life, and it has to do with that as well. So, again, I'm just speaking.
Are you implying anything there, Mr. Bob?
Speaking totally theoretically, I have no interest in that topic at all, or that area.
I'll just remind you that Michael Johnson and I are the same age, so we're going to pay attention to your comments now.
Well, I'd also remind you that that I'm not terribly far behind you.
So I will move to the voting aspect of this one. I do think that there is opportunity for us to reevaluate these. Again, these are draft, and we will continue to work to refine, consolidate, combine, and expand. But I thank you for the questions and the feedback. Just a couple more seconds.
And Dr. Mike and everyone, this is exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah.
This type of questions, this type of comments.
Don't encourage me.
And I may actually, if you don't mind, Loretta, I'm curious if FHWA has produced any guidance for MPO agencies or other transportation to specific functions on how to address or further enhance their efforts on looking at equitable policies in their work.
Policies, I'm not sure we do require that they address equity in transportation planning.
Sure.
We do kind of, I guess, in statute or in executive order have a definition for equity versus equality. And, I would say we're going to be looking a lot more deeply, for lack of a better word at the moment, of equity in the MTPs as we move forward.
That's helpful. I appreciate that feedback. All right, moving on to the next one. This is policy item number 25 as a part of the list. This is the 15-minute city policy underneath the category of policies enhancing land mobility connection. And this is suggesting and recommending that regional and local agencies should consider applying the 15-minute city design policy throughout the entire region. This policy language would help local jurisdictions create local development patterns and supportive infrastructure that guarantees citizens access to all needs within a short walk, bike, or transit trip. This does stem from efforts happening in parts of the region, but this came up from my team as a thought process to maybe consider extending it beyond to allow a consistent level of opportunity throughout the entire region versus just being in one or two jurisdictions. And so this is one of those things that an MPO could certainly help to encourage, and then local jurisdictions could possibly look at local language for policy purposes.
Adam, just to make sure I'm clear, throughout the entire region, region is our planning area or region of the study area region, so to speak?
So that's a great question. So for the purposes of when I say region, I do actually mean the CRTPO region and RFATS region that is mostly encompassing for the Beyond 77 effort. That's where, of course, our micro solutions are existing for the purposes of this analysis. But we do want to at least recognize that these policies could be expanded to the entire metropolitan region, not just necessarily within our study area.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, there's areas outside the study area that there's no way you're going to be able to get to all needs within 15 minutes, just because we have rural areas in part of our study area, inside of our CHCV footprint as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that language, we could certainly work with CRTPO and all of you maybe to change it to talk about in urbanized areas, essentially, or help shape up that language a little bit more to help it become an actionable item for you guys to work with moving into the future. But that is something that was showcasing very well in the evaluation process.
Yeah, the study area of this project is very, very well urban area, but if you do the whole CRTP footprint, you got some really iffy areas.
Sure, good point.
Mhm.
Okay, just a few more seconds. All right, thank you for that feedback. The next one is a programming matter, and I wanted to include it with today's discussion because it was a very big picture component. And it is recommending the development of a regional coalition to support integrated corridor management. And this is under the category of public-public partnerships, where we are recommending that state, regional, and local agencies and governments to coordinate and host a series of dialogues with necessary stakeholders that manage and operate throughout the regional transportation network for the purposes of further educating those involved with the benefits of integrated corridor management and why coordination across all modes, agencies, and jurisdictions is critical for such a program's success in the system. And integrated corridor management can be applied to something as simple as the dynamic messaging systems that are already at play along the interstates, but then could be employed to arterial dynamic messaging systems to kind of play off that, or even to just a further enhanced ITS overlay system. I mean, if you envision the future as to what that could be, if we were to employ technology to do everything, including the connected vehicles that we're hearing about, there's a way that we can better do corridor management across all the agencies that participate and help to manage and monitor all of our roadways and networks. But there's got to be a dialogue about what that looks like and how it is managed and governed.
And Adam, there's a question from Bill, which I think is in regards to the previous conversation about regions. So while everybody's going through the motion of selecting an answer, Bill, I don't know if you still have questions on that, but I would say, taking a step on this, we're going to have three scenarios here. So the primary focus is always the study area, the corridor. But there will be strategies and solutions that, in fact, they go outside those. And the only way to really make it effective or to be implemented, the entire region will have to take an approach. That's the second option. But then there is a third one that I can see now that is really neither or, but it's more about whether it is urban or rural.
Yeah.
Just to have more questions on that, Bill?
No, that's good, Augustine. I guess the point is, to what extent do we involve ourselves in spreading a message throughout the region rather than trying to stay fairly focused on the study area? I mean, there's a lot of valid strategies that are being identified that I think have great benefit throughout the region. But is that truly what this study is trying to do?
And I can let Adam or Bob or anybody else to elaborate on that, but I think the key here is about implementation. So if we come up with a great idea, and through this process of meetings and getting feedback from committees and stakeholders and the public, you make it to the final list of recommendations, we still think it's a great idea, great strategy, yet it has to be, the only way to be fully implemented is for the region, then it's going to die at that point, because even if it's a good idea, but it's on the hands of the entire region. So we are doing our best, even at this initial stage of this this step of the strategies and solutions to really coordinate and bring people on board. We're trying to get the buy-in of the region as well for those other strategies.
And Bob, I don't know if you had anything else to add, but I did want to weigh in to say that when we first started to look at strategies and solutions for this, we were focused initially on the corridor, the study area. When I say that, I mean the study area. And when we started to think of ideas, some of those ideas just didn't make sense to be applied to just the 77 study area. It made sense to be applied to the entire region because they didn't have boundaries. They weren't pieces of infrastructure or systems that could be limited. And so that's when we started to work with Augustine and Bob to ask, is this appropriate for the first stab, and look at, to continue to think bold and big as to where are those opportunities to exist and how do we then shape them appropriately, whether they're localized, hyper-focused, or regionally purposed. I don't know, Bob, if that, you want to expand on that anymore.
You and Augustine hit it on the head, that it's it's a huge study area in one sense, but it's incredibly narrow when you get right down to it, and nothing that we do can be really applied just within that study. Very little can be applied just in the study area.
So we have one more of the top performing ones that we'll vote on, and then we'll have a little bit more of an open dialogue on some others coming through. This last one is an emerging technology component that I wanted to work with you to get your feedback on through the survey part, is ITS Asset Management Database. And we realize that the metro area is just kind of at the start of really creating a kind of a connected ITS network, slowly but surely. But this is going to help create that foundation of helping to track, manage, and do the whole operate, maintain, and improve aspect. So as a building block to one centralized data operating system and management center, regional partners should endeavor to build one centralized ITS asset management database, which then kind of helps you with the governance and data sharing effort. Should include asset management plans and programs, and utilize technology to develop data dashboards, collection plans, sharing procedures, and policies stemming from the assets. This is one of those items that, again, is region-wide and could honestly start to communicate with components once you start to get blending in with the triad and other parts of other areas that we touch. And so this is something that we felt important, because once you start to implement data systems for transportation, there's going to be volumes and volumes and volumes of data and infrastructure to support that. And there's got to be systems and programs in place to help manage that and understand it all. And so by starting the conversation early, we felt it important to document this one, and that's why it is performing so well. So with that, I will open up the voting a little bit more. You guys, just a few more seconds.
Adam, would you mind talking a little bit about maybe if, in terms of where this idea emerged, was there any discussion about who should do this, who should manage it? Is it within existing structures? Do we need to create a new structure for this? Anything of that sort that came out of the idea building process?
Not at this point. I think that could be a part of some of the next steps where we're working with you and other folks that need to be a part of that conversation. I recognize that there are already some level of existence of some of these aspects in their own silos. So I know DOT has something. I know the city of Charlotte has something. But if there's a true sense and desire to regionalize and have a efficient system in place where it's managed centrally, then this is where that idea came out of. And so no, to answer your question, the short, we did not do that type of analysis because we left it open in case. It almost sounds like there needs to be a planning study to inform this.
I think if we get ultimately get the funding we need to conduct the update to the 2001 ITS strategy, then something like this should certainly be part of the scope of work. And I'm not sure when we'll find out about the grant, the application that we submitted last month, I guess it was, but we'll have to remember to make sure that this gets in there.
Absolutely. And I think that we have gone through and started that. We did, in the language of some of these, they do make reference to the regional ITS plan effort that is recognized to be upcoming. And so this is one of those, obviously, you know how we talked about earlier today about tagging some of these solutions or categorizing them for other things and features. This is one of those other things to set them up for the regional ITS planning initiative. So,
A question, Adam.
yes.
If I may ask Bob a question. Bob, didn't we have this discussion in a craft meeting and across several other discussions relative to funding through CMAQ funding? Because this would improve air quality and reduce congestion. And there was great interest expressed by the Gaston MPO, Concord MPO, several of our neighbors in that process. Where does that stand?
In terms of using CMAQ dollars specifically?
Yes, because there was no specific funding for it at that time, and because it would improve air quality issues by reducing congestion. Is that qualifiable under that role?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now, Michael, how that all transpired. And Loretta, I think I'm going to need your help. Was it determined that this was not an eligible type project for CMAQ money? The ITS
Yes,
plan, that is.
It's not an eligible project for CMAQ funding. The only way CMAQ funds can be used in a study is if it leads to a project that's going to reduce congestion.
That's right.
So there's no way to apply benefits to all the various elements of this plan and make it eligible, so to speak.
Okay. So thank you for that feedback on those initial items. Those were the ones that we're selling as a part of our evaluation process in those key areas. And like I said earlier, these are not necessarily poor ideas or poor performers. These are more of those single dimensional items that apply really to one mode or one specific evaluation factor. And so that's why they're at the lower end of the spectrum, but we still wanted to have a dialogue with you to make sure that these still align with some needs of the region, and that's why our team documented them. So this first one we're going to talk about a little bit is a policy to look at freight design policies within complete streets guidelines underneath the policies enhancing land mobility connection. And our team documented this initially as a building block to one centralized data operating system. And well, that is not the right description. Sorry, guys. I know what it says anyway, and the whole point is to really to bring in freight design street components that interact with the complete street system. So I know that the state and some local jurisdictions have their own complete streets guidelines, but this is kind of creating one regional scenario that helps to adapt freight interaction with those complete streets components, especially if delivery and other freight exercises are performed on the street itself. And so that's what we wanted to document here. My apologies for this text mishap, but what I just described is basically what it says. So just ignore that part. Does anybody have any comments about the desire to at least recommend as a policy consideration for encouraging freight design policies within complete streets on a regional and or local level?
Adam, I apologize if I didn't hear it, but does this in any way connect with some curb management type policies that some cities are considering because of the proliferation of UPS vehicles and so forth because of online shopping and so forth, or is this bigger issues than that?
This is actually, so this is the opposite of the bigger issue. So this is more of, I'm glad you brought up the curb lane management component. That is a separate recommendation that is not a part of today's discussion. That was kind of performed middle of the ground because it was applying to multiple modes that could benefit from that curb lane management effort. This one is specifically towards freight design incorporation, but they do rely on each other in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
I think this is an important concept because freight is becoming bigger and bigger with all this, what do they call it? Point of need, or it's just, so yes, freight is becoming a bigger portion of what our transportation issues are.
Okay. And that kind of feedback is what we just need to hear, because Augustine highlighted this as well early on. But some of these are single dimensional items, while we are showing them at the bottom of every list has a bottom to it, right? But there still needs to be a professed and justified value to include them and incorporate them for an action plan to move forward. And so that value helps us document that, or that feedback helps us document that. Moving on to the next one is a multi-purpose bike use policy. And this really applies to more of the urban areas of our study area specifically. And this is talking about looking at regional and local agencies and jurisdictions to consider developing appropriate policy language as cargo and commercial delivery bike usage becomes more prominent. While this is not a thing completely yet in Charlotte, this is to help start having that conversation, especially with the bike group and other forms of commerce that are starting to occur, especially in South End and North End of city in Charlotte, and maybe even some other parts of our study area where there are small urban pockets, because other cities have realized that they needed to adapt and adopt new language to allow this use to exist. And so this is coming from some experiences of my team where they realized that this might be a need.
I'd be more concerned about drone cargo and commercial delivery.
That's valid. That's a good point. That is actually captured in our list. It's through a separate effort, but it is captured.
I see a comment from Travis on the chat box. There are limited bicycle deliveries for food.
Sorry, I meant to say I've started to see some bicycle delivery services in Charlotte. The main ones I have been seeing are branded more for like food.
Yeah.
But they are starting to appear, and they're like regular bike / electric bike hybrids.
Gotcha. And so I think that that's just something that either local jurisdictions or agencies like an MPO, if they need to help with any of those efforts, is to define that use policy if need be. So if there starts to become heavy volumes, how do we do that that shift or space sharing? So that's really what it was. Preparing for the future. The next one is policy recommendation to subsidize rideshare services. This already does exist to a limited extent with CATS. They do have a contract with Lyft to do a first mile, last mile service provision if you're using transit services to make your ride connection. But this is actually recommending a study area-wide or region-wide policy to encourage complete, almost like any jurisdiction can kind of piggyback onto the policy and the contract agreement to procure such contract services. And this does kind of dovetail with some of the regionalization recommendations that are part of the greater list that is not a part of today's discussion, but you will be able to see that as we move forward, especially when we're talking about larger transit expansion services looking towards the future. And so this is a policy to encourage the subsidizing of those services specifically.
Adam, has this been implemented anywhere, something like this in the country?
Yeah, some other bigger cities have certainly done this, mostly out west. I know Seattle has a pretty robust system where they're partnering with Uber and Lyft. Wake County in North Carolina was exploring that option to figure that out with their sales tax referendum, especially in the more outer areas to make those connections occur as long as they were using it for transit purpose trips. But they were trying to make it so that everybody had access to it, not just in certain areas or jurisdictions.
Is it kind of within maybe in the framework of a last mile type of thing? Is that part of the rationale for implementing something like this?
Yeah, there are geofencing services here, at least with what you're kind of alluding to about the last mile, first mile component. but this is also kind of getting at, we recognize that there is the employer tax breaks for ride sharing, but this is actually encouraging a greater adoption of such services if there was a government subsidy program locally or regionally implemented. And those are hit or miss in different metropolitan areas as you look around the country.
Okay.
So Adam, I have a question. This strategy as well as the previous one, are these support functions for the MPO I mean, I think the way they're written, are we designing these for the local governments to adopt, not necessarily the MPO? I guess I'm trying to.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and Bob, I would certainly look to you to answer that a little bit more detail. But I know that in initial conversations with you and your team, it was again part of that bolder vision of thinking big about how to just encourage the mode shift through any level of geography. And so, if there are some of these policy recommendations, it is how can the MPO assist jurisdictions to look at adapting language. But Bob, if you want to expand a little bit further.
Loretta, it's really a matter of the fact that based upon our current structure, a lot of this would be, as Adam described it, where we could provide some assistance, or we could be the messenger or something like that in these areas, because most of these, well, yeah, probably most of these are something that we could not do on our own. And so we would have to be the cheerleader for it, if you will. So this is what I kind of like about it. It's nice to come up with these great ideas and then say to somebody else, hey, you do it.
Yes, I figured that. I just wanted to be sure that's kind of how it was being structured or looked at. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Loretta, and I just want to add that process of assigning who will be in the limitations or even costs of some of these strategies will come up next. That will be the next phase of this process.
Okay.
Now we're going to move on to the section where we're going to talk about the variability of those different items that we're performing across the two scenarios. So the first one that we want to talk about is my team documented a policy recommendation to look at mobility hub parking policies. And when I say the word mobility hub, if you've been following the Connect Beyond initiative, the regional transit plan here in Charlotte, they have started to use language about mobility corridors and mobility hubs. Mobility hubs are just intensified activity centers sprinkled around the metro area that are connected by transit or a multimodal function. And so if in the future, those mobility hubs will become those greater intensified activity centers, then we are recommending an assessment of and looking at policies related to parking issues within those spaces, because then that would further encourage the use of other modes other than just the independent auto users, and using different forms of transportation to access, get around them and between them. And so that was the purpose of documenting this. And it is performing differently because it depends on how you look at it between the independent auto user versus a multimodal component. Any questions or feedback on this one?
I like this one.
Okay. Continuing on, this is another one. Michael, this one stems from the conversation that we had with you a little bit. I don't know if it gets at everything we talked about last time we connected on the phone, but I think that it starts to build upon it. And everybody knows that when you do a local development plan effort, you have to submit a travel or a traffic impact assessment. Now we're actually talking about doing a complete development travel impact plan policy recommendation. And we're suggesting that the MPO could help local agencies coordinate to develop policy language that could or should be adopted by local jurisdictions into their development ordinances that actually requires such an item to be a workplace travel impact plan. The goal of the plan requirement would be to estimate and model anticipated travel impacts by employees' travel location using any type of mode of transportation. Now, that is a challenge, but I think that it would give you more of an answer, more than just what the central line, the travel demand model produces today. And this also kind of gets at that real-time effort, Michael, that we talked about a little bit. You start to collect the data, you start to understand the impacts that local development starts to incur from a local and regional level, and you start to understand how people are operating between points A, B, and C. And so this was our initial take on how we could implement that.
I think one thing that you have done in crafting the language on this, you said it better than I did, but what this causes people in the region to do is take ownership. And that's the first step in collectively solving our total travel demand within the area. You know, we need to be cognizant. I think of I-77 as a big water line, and we're all putting, or a sewer line. We're all putting affluent in there. You know, we're not necessarily cognizant of what the guy in Pineville is doing in Statesville, but yet it's a sum of the parts. And I think that in addition to having an empirical value associated with real time, it also causes awareness. And I think that's going to be the real goal for elected officials collectively as a region, is to take ownership and become aware not only of what they're doing, but what their neighbors are doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael, for that. And oh, go ahead, Bob, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, if we're going to ever do anything, say coming out of Connect Beyond, for example, like a regional transportation demand management initiative, this would be vital to something like that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch back on one of the questions earlier as to how does, a lot of these recommendations that we're reviewing right now are applicable not just to the study area, not just to the CRTPO planning jurisdiction, but really to the entire Charlotte metropolitan area. And while Bob may just want to say, you do this and you do this and you do this, it's more of it's going to be a collective discussion, and we'll want to work with CRTPO and many of you as Augustine and I work to at least craft a recommendation implementation action plan, is to who needs to be at the table for some of these discussions in the future, and how does that play out? It's just not something that is going to be all done next year. It's going to take some time, and there's going to be lots of little different key focus areas and groups to help push a lot of these forward. And so I think that's going to take some effort in and of itself. But we hope that we produce several items here for great consideration that will help to enhance and improve mobility and reduce congestion on the local and regional level.
Adam, this is Bill. I think this strategy is excellent. The title of it is a bit different from the body of it, in that the title implies all sorts of development, whereas the body is dealing with workplace. So is there a better way to link those two together, both the strategy itself and the description?
No, that's a very good point. I appreciate that feedback, and I think that it does need to be more global than just workplace. Thank you. And thank you, Gene Conti. Gene Conti has joined us. So hello, Gene.
Sorry, I'm so late.
Not a problem. Appreciate it.
Double booking problem.
And just, I think everybody's aware, but Gene Conti is a part of our project team. He has been a part of this since the beginning, helping to advise on a lot of these efforts. And he did sit down with me, and we went through all of these policy recommendations one by one, and he helped to at least firm and shape up the way that the language exists today. And then we helped to expand on some of them. So thank you for that, Gene, and we'll continue to refine as we hear feedback moving forward.
Yep.
Another one to talk about is, this is an interesting one, comes out of an experience that one of our team members had living in another country for a while, but this is encouraging a policy to allow bike highways to exist, and that would be to connect dead-end streets, either through a regional effort or starting locally and trying to expand and creating that network, whether that's connecting the greenways and existing infrastructure, but really allowing those rights of way to be utilized better, and then encourage more utilization for pedestrians and cyclists. And so this is, again, the network will be in addition to the Greenway network, but allow for greater connections to it by allowing for facility connections from cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets. And I believe that this is, Gene, we talked about this. This is a city near somewhere in the Netherlands.
Utrecht.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Utrecht.
Mm-hmm.
And wild success. So any comments or feedback on that?
Yeah, I guess I had a question. Are you talking only opening these cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets up for bicycle and pedestrian connections, or you're opening it up completely for vehicles, bike ped, everything?
Really, just the non-motorized. That was
Okay.
the intent.
Adam,
But-
is it as uncommon as it seems that this, I mean, it seems like this is a very simple thing to do and that people wouldn't get terribly upset by it. I mean, opening it up to vehicular traffic, yes, that would be, oh boy. But bike and ped, you know, you wouldn't think that would be so controversial, but others may disagree.
Yeah,
Bob.
still, oh, yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Bob, you haven't been in the trenches enough, my friend.
But I've seen it in a lot of
talk about
places
this.
where it's been done. You know, where you have those paths coming out of the or leading from the cul-de-sac to a greenway or something like that. So I've seen it a lot.
I do not disagree that it's incredibly valuable. I'm simply pointing out that if the connection is not there when people move in, to even if the right of way is there, to actually make the connection later on is fraught with politics.
That's the hard part.
Even at the even just simply at, because I know Charlotte had a connectivity policy and was trying to open up cul-de-sacs for vehicular traffic. But have we done it just for have people tried it just for bike and ped?
We've made that recommendation in Huntersville, or I've made that recommendation in Huntersville as part of a comprehensive transportation plan.
Mm-hmm.
But the example that comes to mind is simply if you talk to the people with Mecklenburg County Greenway, when they have even secured the rights of way as part of the subdivision design process to make these connections down to the Greenway network from cul-de-sacs, and they come back to actually do it when they build the Greenway, typically they are met with fierce resistance.
Mm-hmm. Because it's been many years since.
Yeah, because those people are going to come by my house and they're going to come through my backyard and they're going to steal my television and take it to the nearest transit stop.
Right. Okay. I hadn't realized anything had. Well, I don't think anything holistically has been done. You know a single approach just for this, but I mean, I can see the point.
Yeah, I could see people saying, well, if you'll do it for this, then the next is you'll open it up for the car.
Yeah.
You know, like that stepping stone, and yeah. But it's a great idea.
You want to lead us on that, Loretta?
No.
All right. Well, good feedback, good questions. We'll revisit this if we need to.
No, it's a great idea, but I agree with Bill. It's any change, people, the right of way may have already been in the plot before the division was built, but they don't know it when they bought the land, and all of a sudden you're changing something, and so I like the little sign saying, oh, by the way, at some point in time, this stub road is going to be extended upon development, and just put put little signs in the ground and say, oh yeah, there's going to be a greenway extension at this point in time. And so they can't say, oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
It just drives me crazy.
That's a great point. And I will also add to this, my team was directed to think impartially. We recognize that politics play into a lot of these things, and there are a lot of local and regional issues, but we pitched all of these onto the table from an impartial viewpoint. And then we will get into the whole, well, what about X and what about Y when we have more discussions with several of you moving forward. So I did want to make that clear. And I know from living here, and I've learned just from the past year and a half, that there are issues with some of these from a political standpoint. But in reality, they could be really successful if there's a desire to do them. So moving forward, we have a couple more to talk about. This is a little more direct and specific. This is a recommended planning study, and I'm not sure if there's ever been one done comprehensively along the entire corridor study area or not. I know that it may have been done in pieces or segments, but we actually recommend doing a ramp metering study in the 3 separately distinct defined geographic zones of the study area: the north, the metro, and the south, which is basically broken up by the 3 counties the study area impacts, because they are pretty distinct travel markets, serving kind of different needs and very different interchange setups. And so this is one of those recommendations we felt was important to at least include initially, and if it needs to be changed or edited somehow, especially to reflect past efforts, which we were not aware of, we will certainly do that.
I think there was a ramp metering study done in North Mech area, and because a couple of the ramps were extremely short and would have to be elongated to make it even possible, including the ramps that lead to the causeway over Lake Norman. So I know at least one study has been done.
There was a regional ramp metering study done, 5 years ago now, perhaps more than that at this point. I mean, truly regional. It extended at I-85 in Gaston County, up 85 into Cabarrus County.
Okay. Any action coming out of that, or is it just here you go?
There was a couple of projects on I-77. I think it was 2 projects on I-77 South. I don't know where they stand at this point. I think they've been delayed or I can't remember exactly, but there were at least a couple of things that advanced on I-77 South, but I don't think they're necessarily moving along right now.
Okay. James, let's make a note to make sure that we revisit that on the master project list that we were provided. I want to make sure that those are documented with our information. I don't recall seeing that, so I want to make sure that we double back on that. Okay, just 1 or 2 more here. This one came out of some discussions with some of CRTPO leadership and some of you, but looking at conducting a corridor access management planning study for specific corridors that interact with the study area itself. And so the goal of the study would be to identify existing corridor functionality and develop alternative concepts that allow for a complete streets concept with managed access. So those 2 typically don't go together, but we wanted to at least encourage the combination of the 2 so that there was a nice boulevard impact. And some of those facilities for consideration would be US 70, US 21, where it is independent of the interstate itself, and even segments of NC 115. If we are missing some of those facilities, or if you have other feedback for what I just stated, please let me know.
I think this one is going to be important to pursue at some point, Adam.
Sure. And Bob, Bob and Augustine, that we didn't do the breakout for any of the programming aspects, but if we need to do a breakout of specific corridor line items to create that action plan moving forward, so corridor management plan for 70, corridor management plan for 115, we can certainly do that. And as we identify more as needed, but as for right now, they're all within this one item.
Right.
Okay. And then I believe our last one, before I get into some notes about our engagement period coming up, this is a very specific one, but we felt it was important to at least discuss, and it is a programming aspect to do a planning, study, and evaluation of at-grade rail crossings for bike and pedestrian treatments. While there are not many of them, there are still several railroad crossing interactions at roadways where the sidewalks just stop. And there's no way for people to somewhat safely travel across them, whether on bike or even for ADA users and wheelchairs or other efforts that they need to require for them to be mobile. And so we are recommending a full-blown corridor study-wide evaluation planning study to look at where those needs are, a needs assessment, and then create a prioritization program through the MPO or other jurisdictions to help get those treatments put into place. Any comments or feedback on that item? Okay, well, that is the last one from the list of critical items that Augustine and I wanted to cover with you all today. I will get into how we're going to be able to showcase the full list to you if you want to dive in, but I will get to that in just a second. We did want to give you an update on where we stand with phase 3 engagement. That is kicking off in April. April 1st is our go live date for phase 3 engagement. And we are doing a series of things to help engage the public as well as you and multiple stakeholders across the region and the study area to have their voices heard. We are doing another survey. In addition to all of our success that we've had with our past 2 surveys, we want to continue that momentum. And our last survey was a little technical and complex, and so we wanted to simplify it a bit more. Instead of asking the public to wade through these 170 plus items, we really wanted to allow them to focus in and weigh in on those scenario weight values. So those percentages that we apply to those 6 overarching evaluation criteria. We've crafted some questions that really help them understand what they mean, why they're important, and asking them to do a personal budgeting evaluation as to what they mean to them. And that will then help to inform CRTPO and the team as to how we finalize one scenario moving forward to create that recommended list of solutions. My team is working very hard to also create an interactive data dashboard of the master list. And this will be published live through our project website, where you will be able to interact through those key area definitions, those category pieces underneath those key areas, and you will be able to see all the ones that roll up into each one of those sections. The graphs that you see on the right are the ones that showcase how they score and shape up against each other through the 2 different scenarios across those 6 evaluation criteria. And then as you click on each individual line item, especially for the project implementation factors, you'll be able to click on that and go to see more details. And most of them have geospatial attributes applied to them, where you'll be able to see the connection of how we think that it would be most appropriate to further evaluate and assess what land area, those traffic analysis zones from our mixed use indicator map, of where we feel local jurisdictions and the MPO could work in partnership to help implement and prioritize some of those infrastructure projects in the future. So fully robust system, and it will be a dynamic system. As we continue to collect feedback and update things, we will go ahead and continue to update it live. And this will remain live beyond the engagement period so that people can continue to see the process moving forward. There will also be an opportunity for you all and the public to provide open-ended comments on any one of these line items through a form field on our project website that will also go live on April 1st. Another feature is we have several actual events where we'll be actively engaging with people. What you see on the left of your screen is what the public sees and what they've acknowledged to be the project schedule throughout, because that's how they're involved. But from the project team standpoint, there's lots of things going on in between, which you certainly know about. But phase 3 is what we're moving into, and we're doing 4 critical things that we'll be engaging with folks passively and actively. The first one is general public sessions. We're calling those active things just as we're doing today. We will be holding a webinar feature style thing where we'll present highlights of the efforts of the project, as well as kind of highlights of what the goals are of the entire study, and encouraging them to go to our call to action, which is to complete that survey and then learn more as they go throughout our project website. Item number 2 listed there, that is community partnerships. is we are actually going to go where the people are, not asking the people to come to us. And so we have actually reached out to organizations like chambers of commerce, community organizations that exist throughout, nonprofit organizations, and we have reached out to them to find out what their board meeting schedules are in the month of April and early May. And several of them have welcomed us with open arms to be a part of that, where we will give them updates and engage with them, answer any questions they have, and again, encourage them to participate in our call to action. The third item is on April 1st. We will be doing a media open house to engage with all the large and small media outlets that want to be involved and write a story or do an interview with any member of the CRTPO project team to help encourage the public to participate in our call to action. And those stories will be published and aired sometime that first week of April or second week of April. And the last is an on-demand virtual expo. And some of you may have seen this through other initiatives that you're involved in through CRTPO or other organizations. But my team is working very diligently to create this virtual space that would act as though you are in a public open house setting. And this is a visual example of what that could look like. And I'm going to open up a example shortly. Apologize, need to open the link. And this will be customized to capture the true regional essence of this initiative. We don't want it to just be representing one jurisdiction or one other area. We're going to make sure that there are key components that identify Statesville all the way down to Rock Hill somehow in one room, whether it's through flags, images of main streets, or even seals and crests. But you will see that there's a virtual interaction component here. We will orient people to the room, easy to use guidance, cues, and arrows, and we will have information boards designed throughout that describes our project progress and highlight that will lead them to a video that encourages them to participate, and then a link to the survey and other resources available to them. So those are our phase 3 engagement updates. We've spent a good amount of time preparing for this, and we'll be spending 6 weeks talking with as many people as we can so that we can continue to break records and break ground as we talk to the public. Does anybody have any questions about any of that before we move on to the last points of today's meeting? All right, well, Augustine, I will actually turn it back to you to kind of segue into that last slide.
Thank you, Adam. Are there any questions or comments from anyone in regards to the public engagement? I see a comment from Loretta saying that she liked these efforts. And yes, indeed, I think this is a critical piece of the study to get the public engaged, to get the public educated. It will be part of our, at least it's in the conversation for the implementation plan going forward on how we maintain that momentum with the public, with elected officials, which, by the way, I had to admit I'm disappointed to see the turnout for today. We have a group of 12 members, the advisory committee, and we only showing 3 today. So I don't know. I'll be looking for advice from Dr. Mike and others on how we can probably motivate or bring advisory committee members on board, because this has happened before. That on average, we only get 2 or 3 out of the entire group of advisory committee members. As well with the South Carolina folks. As you can see, we had nobody today from South Carolina. And throughout this entire process, 18 months into this process, we never had anyone from South Carolina DOT or anybody other than RFATs outside David Hooper. So if you can send me anything, if you would like to discuss that, we still have some time, a couple minutes, 10 more minutes. We'll be happy to hear some advice on that.
Augustine, I'll say it's not for lack of trying.
I tried to shame him once at the CRTPO board meeting. I'm not adverse to doing it again.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I need to have the list of the individual members so I can personally shame.
I can do that, sir. I can send you that list, Dr. Mike, of the participants. Yes.
And I'm pretty sure I already have the list if I look at the email you sent to this meeting.
Augustine,
Well,
don't you have you've published our tracker, so that's on our website.
Yes, about a year ago. So probably after the second round or first round of workshops, I decided to start doing that without having names, just jurisdictions and a check next to it. So we can show. I didn't do it to shame people. I did it just to collect evidence that, hey, we have tried. We have done 10 other meetings and town X never participated.
We got that same issue at the board level as well. Sometimes never show up.
Yep.
And remind me sometime, Bob. I need to see our attendance record for last year.
I'll let you know now. It's a little off topic, but since the issue has come up, I conducted a presentation to the Monroe City Council Tuesday night, I guess it was, and I have a meeting with Mayor Kilgore on Monday to review next week's agenda. So I'm hopeful that that's maybe generated Monroe coming back to the table.
As they say, if you're not seated at the table, you're on the table.
My advice, Augustine and Adam, is few are a prophet in their own homeland, so do not be despondent. Quality of what you are producing is of such a caliber, it will bear you out. And I think that when you begin to have your conversations with other elected officials in the region and with the public in general, I think that you'll see your interest level peak. This really is a very comprehensive approach that you've taken in this project, and I think you're to be complimented on that. It's probably one of the best analyses of any item that I've seen, having been on the CARTCO board for quite a few years. It's outstanding.
Thank you, Dr. Mike and Michael. Jen, were you going to say something?
No.
And last but not least, so I'll be sending, I guess next steps, I'll be sending an email, hopefully the beginning of next week, with the link to the Power BI, where I can show the the full list, the 177 strategies and solutions. So the mission, should you choose to accept it, is for you to spend time and only review 15 out of 177, for you to review the rest of those 177 and provide us feedback, whether you like it, you don't like it, and anything in between. Now, we do have a contingency plan, and if none of that works and none of those 177 strategies work, so we do have Mr. LeVar Ball, and I will let him explain on a contingency plan for this region.
This better work.
All right. LaMelo has got this. And after he's won, he's going to unite both North and South Carolina into a super Carolina called Carolyssus. Carolyssus, monster of the South. Second cousin to Mothra. Never lost to Godzilla. Never to the Zilla.
Carolyssus could be the name of a new agency you guys create.
And it's important
Gateway
to
Gastonia.
Yes.
Indeed. The good news about that, if we change the name of the Carolinas to Carolyssus, we don't have to change the acronyms from CRTPO. I think it was Travis O'Brien pointed that out a few days ago. I mean, we can continue being known as CRTPO.
That's right.